So this is the page as we left it. And as I said, we'll work on this image a bit more in future modules. For now, I want to continue working on this page, on the content on this page to be precise. For example, our plans. This section clearly isn't finished. We want to show a variety of plans the user may choose from here, and the styling can be improved too. For example, this could be centered, but we also need more content, obviously. Then below that we'll add yet another section and then a footer, but let's get there step by step and let's start with these plans now. For that, attached to this video you will find an HTML file with some additional content which we add to our page. We add it here in the section with the ID plans, and I want to replace this paragraph here with the content of the file you find attached to this video, this HTML content. Here we describe the different plans we got in our fictional store, in our fictional hosting service. Each plan is simply an article element here with some information like the name of the plan, the price, a short subtitle if you want to call it like this, and a list of the features you get with the plan. So that is a setup, some code, which you might actually see if that were a real hosting website. If we save that and reload the page, this is what it looks like. Now, actually, as always, this is a working site. Well, except for the buttons, they don't do anything yet. But, of course, it's working. That is not everything we want to have. We want it to look good too. And the look only is okay. A user could probably work with that, but we can certainly do way better. In the end, what I want this section to look like is this. Now, getting there is actually less difficult than it might look like when you first see the end result. So let's start working on that. And of course, the place to start working is in our main.css file, where we want to write some code, some styles for this newly added content. In there, if we scroll up a little bit, so above this whole header part, we will actually see that section title, which we already defined. And that section title is the first thing we use in the plan section here. We had this here before. We just added the part below it. So the part below is where we will continue working. And the idea, of course, is to style each plan in the same way. And as you saw in the preview, the middle plan, the recommended one, should be highlighted so that we kind of push the user towards picking this one. So for that, it makes sense to give each plan, so each article here, the same class, I guess. The class, of course, can be named in whichever way you want, and I will just name it plan, because, well, it is a plan on my page here. You could, of course, also name it product or anything like that. So I add this plan class to all three articles, and with that added, we can style it. Now, I will add these styles above my header styles, but below the product overview style. And there I'll simply add the plan class selector. And with that selector, we now can, well, get started giving this plan a nice look. And I will start by, first of all, giving it a background color. You can, of course, pick any color you want. I'll take a light green to fit the look of the rest of our page. And for that light green, I picked the following hex code, D5FFDC. So this is a nice green tone we can use. I also want to align all the text inside of a plan in the center. And we can do that with the text align center property declaration, where we simply, well, define all inline elements and therefore all text that's inside of this box in the center, in the middle. Then we could add some padding to have some distance between the edges of our box and the content of it. And here I'll define 16 pixels as a padding, But I also want to add some margin. To be precise, I want to add some margin to the top and bottom so that our plans have a little bit more room to the section title above them and to any content that comes below them. Maybe 8 pixels is a good value here. And finally, I want to have all my three plans sit in the same row. So what we need to do is we need to set display to inline block, as you learned. This turns them into, well, inline block elements. Hence, they now can fit into the same row. But for this to work, we also need to adjust their width. And Actually, we don't need to adjust their width. They would take as much width as their content requires, but that would probably be too much for most screens. So I want to limit their width to 30% of the surrounding container, which in our case, if we inspect our code, simply is this div, where it will also take the full available space. That will mean it takes the full space given to it by this section with the ID plans. Well, that section, we never defined a style for it, so it also takes the full available width, as does the main section. So all the way down to our plan, a plan by default would take the full available width. The surrounding div does so. So if we give the plan article a width of 30%, it will essentially get 30% of the page width, since we never restrict that on any higher level element. So 30% on the plan should make sure that we fit the 3 plans in one row. And by the way, for smaller screens, this will of course look very ugly. It is something we'll fix in the responsive design section, where we will dive deeply into how you can adjust your layout for smaller screens. But for now, this should do the trick. Now, one other thing I want to do here is I want to set the vertical align to middle to ensure that all 3 plans are vertically aligned, well, in the middle, so that the middle is the same for all of them. Now, if we save that and we go back to our page, we can reload it, and this already looks quite nice. We got the 3 plans in one row. Now, the middle one is a bit bigger because it has this extra recommended badge, and it should be bigger because it is the recommended plan, so this actually should stand out. We'll also change its background color. And if we change the page size, then we see the plans scale with it. On small devices, this looks ugly, and eventually we need to add a line break because the content of the plan just is broader than the width we designed or we set up. And on very big screens, on the other end, our plans get stretched out. But these are things we will work on later once we learn how to, well, add a responsive design and control the maximum widths of elements, for example. So that is something we'll fix. But for now, this is already a nice look. Of course, we're not done though. The plans need to be styled differently. These list items need to look differently. The button needs to look differently. And as I said, the middle plan, the recommended one, also should look different than the other 2 plans. It should stand out. Now, these are all things we'll work on. One other thing I also want to do is I want to center this choose your plan text. And if you already know how to do that, here's your chance. Quickly do that. It's only one property you need to add. The one property you need to add is simply the text align one. So text align will ensure that all the inline content of the section title element, which is h1 element, so therefore simply the text inside of it, that this inline content will be centered in its line and therefore will be centered horizontally. So if we now reload, this looks better. That's a great first step. Now, in the next lectures, I want to continue working on this. I want to make sure that our plans really look nice and that the middle plan really stands out from the rest.